You're listening to the Classic Gamers Guild podcast.
I'm a little muddy on the timeline here. After Golden Wake, was that Shardlight next?
Yes.
Shardlight.
Yes.
Which I sadly have not gotten around to playing yet, but I did financially support it by buying it.
Well, I actually don't get any money from Shardlight, so I appreciate it. But
Nice try, Rick.
Swing and a miss.
All right. Well, you do
fine,
seem
it's
slightly
fine.
more popular at any rate. Okay, so you don't make any more money off that now?
No, because since I was hired, the deal was that I got hired to work on that game on a salary, so in exchange for royalties. So
I see, gotcha.
Yeah, I don't get any. I mean, I got paid for it while I was making it, but yeah, I don't
Right.
get
Right.
any of the royalties from it, which is fine.
Mhm.
You know. But yeah, so I always feel bad because I'm like, I want people to play Shardlight. Of course, I want people to play Shardlight. But you know, when people are like, "Oh, how can we support you?" I'm like, buy my other games that so,
Literally
Yeah.
any other game of mine.
yeah. So Shardlight, I wanted to make a game that was set during the Black Plague, and I wanted to have a character in it that was like representative of death, but was also a giant raven type character. So I started talking about it with Ben Chandler, who you may know as the artist and also developer of many games.
Yes.
And
It's for you.
he and I decided to we workshopped it a little bit, and we decided to make it a post-apocalyptic near future game. And we kept the idea of having the giant raven death man. And we worked out the details, and we were like, oh cool, let's make this game Shardlight. Which was named because he drew a background that had the glowing shards in it, and I thought, oh, that's cool. And he was like, what are we going to call our game? I'm like, I don't know. He's like, I need to make a folder. What do we call it? And I was like, I don't know, just make something up. He was like, all right, I'm going to call it Shardlight. I was like, all right, fine. And then we never came up with anything better, so that's why it's called Shardlight.
I love that.
Yeah, that's just one of those things.
Gotta love just naming the first two things you see in a room.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing, right? Like, titles are really hard. And
Yeah.
with a Golden Wake, the title came to me pretty easily, and I thought it was clever because, like, I was doing research about I was doing research on the history, and I found the whole thing about, like, how they used to advertise Coral Gables as, follow the Golden Galleon and all that. And I was like, oh, the Golden Galleon, that's very poetic. What does the Golden Galleon leave behind? A Golden Wake. And so I was like, oh, that's cool. And then Shardlight, that came about as an accident. Lamplight City gave me a hell of a time. I really, really struggled naming that game. And Rosewater was another one of the...
Yeah.
Well, thank you. Rosewater was another one of those flukes where it was like, oh, I already have a title for this. Okay, Rosewater, that'll work. So,
For a Western, Rosewater is such a good name, it makes me oddly jealous. Like, even though I don't even plan on making a Western anything, I'm like, that's as out of the park as you could nail a Western name. It's so cool.
honestly, the way that I came up with that was I was writing the script for... I was writing my world building document, and I was like, okay, so it's going to start in this town. What do I call it? What sounds Western? Okay, Rosewater. That sounds cool. It was named that way because, or let's say it was called that because it's not by a river that smells nice, and so the people who sell it called it Rosewater. Okay, whatever. So I'm thinking, what do I call this game? What do I call this game? What do I call this game? And my girlfriend, who is also my script editor and writing partner on the game, she's like, why don't you just call it Rosewater? I was like, that's true. It does. That works on many levels.
You didn't just happen to have a box of Turkish delights or something on your desk and just like
No, I didn't. And then I come to find out that the LucasArts game Outlaws, which I've never played,
Neither.
the whole driving force of it is that the guy goes out to get his wife Rosewater, and then he comes home and like his family's been murdered. So it's like the inciting incident of that game. I'm like, oh, well, that's a terrible coincidence. But okay. Yeah, so we did Shardlight, and yeah, the whole reason that came about as far as the situation was because Ben had just been hired as the full-time artist at Wadjidai, So Dave was kind of like in a position where he's like, well, I'm paying Ben a salary to work on this full time. So what are we going to do with you? I'm like, well, I'm making the game too. Let's figure something out. So then that's how we came up to that agreement.
Right.
So yeah, we did Shardlight. That came out in 2016. And then I started working on Lamplight City.
And that was on your own, Lamplight City, with your own company then?
Well, so Lamplight City, so after Shardlight came out, I got laid off because, indie games are not always commercially viable. Not that Shardlight didn't do well, but, paying 2 people full time was not necessarily in the cards. So I got laid off, and which was fine. I was kind of expecting it to happen. But then we were Dave was like, "Oh, I'll be happy to publish Lamplight City." But then, as I worked on it more, we kind of realized that the game I wanted to make and the game Dave was expecting weren't exactly the same thing. So rather than he was like, rather than make you make these changes that I'm going to suggest, which will kind of change the game radically, maybe we just shouldn't go forward with this. And I was like, yeah, you know what, you're right. Which. I admit I freaked out at the time because I was like, oh my god, where am I going to find another adventure game publisher? But at the same time, I'm happy it happened because I actually had to pay my dues as an indie, Right. I was in a very fortunate spot that I knew someone, and I got into this because I knew someone. I actually had to do the legwork and, reach out and find a new publisher and actually do the struggle. Which I think was a good thing. And so I found Application Systems Heidelberg. And yeah, I did Lamplight City with them, and I'm also doing Rosewater with them.
Nice.
So yeah.
Yeah, I am also a big fan of Lamplight City as well.
Yeah.
Thanks.
And I
need to make a game that you all hate just to, keep me grounded.
I haven't played Shardlight yet, so there's hope.
Okay, you can hate Shardlight. I won't mind.
Sorry, the Lost Treasures of Ron was a little dodgy. I mean, yeah.
Yeah, no, that one's pretty bad too.
I was actually a little surprised to hear or read about how Lamplight City had the possibility of failing cases and still progressing, but. Because when I played it, I actually never came across that. I actually did manage to get through it, so I just sort of thought, oh, pretty good standard, but excellent, but standard adventure game. And then I found out later about all these different paths, all these different possibilities. Like, oh, okay, now that's really impressive because that's really it's just the covering the bases, being able to acknowledge that something did or didn't happen and moving forward with the story. With that in mind, that's really, as Paul and I work on probably a smaller scale game, that just to think, we're now in a position where we can look at that and think holy crap, that's a lot to take into account.
It's kind of a double-edged sword because if you do it well and no one notices, not if you do it well, it's a double-edged sword because if you do it and no one notices, then you did it right, I feel like, because right. I don't know, it's tricky because you want to have it in there. I wanted to have it in there because my main thing was I didn't like how detective games, at least the ones that I had played, were very hand-holdy. And right. My main thing was LA Noire, and LA Noire was oh, you have to be a detective and you have to collect the evidence and whatever, and you can fail the interrogations. But I played through that game purposely getting everything wrong, and it still pushed me to the right solution anyway.
Yeah.
So, the Frogwares, the more recent Sherlock Holmes games, also had the thing of, you can get the cases wrong. But if you got the cases wrong, all that really happened was you got an angry letter from someone related to whoever you falsely accused. So I was I like that idea, but also the problem, this is a whole other can of worms, but the problem with playing as Sherlock Holmes is that there's the disconnect between you and the player, or you and the character, because Sherlock Holmes is a genius detective.
Yeah.
So if you play him as an idiot who gets everything wrong, there's dissonance there.
Yeah.
So So yeah. But yeah, I just liked the idea of, you're a detective, and how many cases actually get solved in real life. So like, you can get things wrong, or if you mess up, you close off all your leads. Instead of being stuck in a dead end, you just say, oh, well, I can't solve this. Let's go on to the next one.
But then the rest of the game reflects it. I mean, it's not just hollow that way. I love that so much.
Yeah, I mean, thank you. I tried to do it, to have the game be as reactive as possible. Like, obviously it didn't do it as much as I necessarily would have liked, because I'm just one guy, and I only have so many resources and time to make a game. But like, the tricky thing too that I wanted to make sure also was that there's certain cases where if you accuse the wrong suspect, it'll have consequences that you see in a later case. But I wanted to make sure that the ability to get the correct outcome in each case didn't depend on that. So like, if you accuse the wrong person in case 1, I didn't want to prevent you from being able to accuse the right person in case 4, for example.
Right.
So the ability to like close off the leads and screw up your lead to the correct solution should only be accessible or able to be screwed up in the particular case it's in. So on one hand, like, yeah, okay, it's fun to do that, but on the other hand, if you get them all right, you don't see that, like you said, like Rick said. Like, so I don't know. I just think it's nice to have it in there, but it definitely is it can be a design headache. And I mean, I've been thinking about how to do it in different ways to make it more apparent, but I haven't really thought about that too much yet.
Yeah.
I don't always catch that stuff either. Playing Indiana Jones Fate of Atlantis, and I was like, oh, do you want to use like your fist? Do you want to use your wit? Do you want to, take the girl? Do you not? And I was just like, I'm assuming I'm just picking all the right choices because the game's progressing, right? That means I played the game right. So if I'm going to play it again, I've already known what I did was right. So that's what I'm going to do again. And I wouldn't even know.
Yeah.
So, carrying on to Rosewater, are you continuing your design choice to eliminate inventory puzzles?
No, I am bringing back the inventory in Rosewater.
Back. Nice.
Interesting.
Yes.
Yeah.
So what made you go back?
Well, the main reason that I didn't have inventory in Lamplight City was because it was a detective game, and I didn't think that inventory combination puzzles and stuff really had a place in a detective game, because I figured if you're a private investigator and you're trying to get into something, you're not going to create like a tool to pick a lock. You're going to find a locksmith, or you're going to do something else or something. So I figured the focus would be more interesting on just like, investigating crime scenes and like talking to people and stuff. My main influence for that was Blade Runner, which the PC game, which also didn't have inventory. So
good.
Yeah, so it was a great game. It was primarily a detective game, and it didn't have inventory, so I knew it could be done. So I had to think about how to design puzzles and stuff that didn't involve the inventory. But for a Western, an adventure, quote unquote, because I am very originally referring to it as an adventure game because you do go on an adventure in it. Like, it's akin to something like Fate of Atlantis or something where you're actually going on, a journey that's an adventure. I thought it was appropriate to have inventory again. Not crazy combination puzzles because I've never been good at those. And I actually was thinking a lot about that recently, and wondering why it is that most adventure games default to like the most ludicrous of inventory puzzles, which is creating crude tools when there's so many other types of inventory puzzles that you can do, but because they're logical and make sense, I guess people think they're too easy, so they don't tend to be used as much. But that's a whole other thing that I don't need to get into right now. Read my newsletter, everybody. I write about crap like that all the time.
It's a good question too, because I've been pondering the importance of difficult puzzles myself lately. Just using myself as my only reference, for example, where I'm like, I would err on the side of easy, because if the story's great, then cool. Let's just breeze through this and have a good time. Yeah, I don't know. I don't have like an answer for that, but it's just in that same vein of fine lines.
Yeah, my thinking lately has just been, don't put in a puzzle that's a puzzle for the sake of having a puzzle. If that makes sense. Like exactly. I think that I've been thinking a lot about puzzles in the sense of like just relating, like as an opportunity to learn more about the characters or about the world or whatever. If it's like, you know, you have somebody guarding a door, that's a standard adventure game puzzle, and you probably have to distract them or you have to get them something or whatever. But like you can use that to explore, what are they doing there? Why are they guarding the door? You know, like maybe they're doing it because they don't want to, but they're like forced to because, I don't know, they need the money or something. And like you can learn more about the character, you can learn more about the world, you can figure out a way that's, even if it is just a distraction puzzle, at least like have some interesting way of doing it, you know? And I think as far as difficulty goes, like if it makes sense, I think people are gonna think it's easy, but like I don't think difficulty should be think like me related, you know? Like
I'm actually just really coming from a selfish angle because I'm helping to write Paul's game that he's making, and I'm just kind of thinking like, well, I want people to get to the end of it. I want people to see the whole story. I don't want to prevent them from doing that. So I guess there's that sort of that selfishness from the way I see it, where it's sort of like, well, I don't want to make this too hard because I want people to get to the end. Yeah,
and yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, the thing is like, and this also kind of goes back to the whole idea of designing multiple solutions. It's like nowadays there's so many games, it's hard enough to expect someone to finish your game once, let alone go back and replay it. So yeah, like you want your players to finish your game. So like there's no need to make them angry because it's like, oh, this puzzle's too hard, I'm not going to come back to this ever again, you know?
Yeah.
So you're not like, this game isn't long enough, I'm going to throw in a maze now. That's not your thing.
Oh god, no. God, no. The day I make a maze is the day I don't know. Insert horrible punishment here. That being said, though, I have had games where I've had mazes. It's just I've tried to like make them so that it's not the navigation of the maze is not the puzzle. It's figuring out how to get through it. Like in the remake of the first Ben Jordan game, I had a maze where you had to like sniff because you were searching for a skunk ape. And so, like, you basically just have to figure out that you have to use nasal spray to make you smell better, or make not you smell better, but like, you know what I mean. Your ability to smell is better.
Stop a skunk from smelling.
Right, exactly. So, like, once you figured that out, it was just like, click the nose icon. It's like, oh, you smell something coming from the north. So then you just navigate it that way. But yeah, I've never wanted to do a maze where it's just like, yes, you have to solve the maze now because whatever, or sliding tile puzzles or any Highlights magazine puzzles, as I like to call them. Yeah.
That magazine, I was never smart enough for Highlights. I was more Chickadee and Owl. I'm like, I'm not one of those Highlights kids.
Oh, boo. I love Highlights.
Do you know what my absolute... You know what I think probably the worst offender is? Did you all ever play Still Life?
No, I've heard of it, but I've not played it.
Still Life is infamous for, it's like you're playing an FBI investigator. You're tracking down a serial killer. It's like this gritty, grim, dark, fairly interesting story. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, I'm going to go read about... I'm going to go visit my dad for Christmas. He's got my grandpa's, case notes, because her grandfather was also a detective, who you also play as in, 1920s Prague, which also sounds really interesting, right? So she gets home, and she's like, Dad, I'm home. I'm going to read Grandpa's notes now. And he's like, oh, honey, I'll let you do that, but could you bake me those cookies first? And you have to literally bake him cookies. And it's not even like, oh, let's follow this recipe. It's like, oh, the recipe's coded. So you have to figure out what it means. And you have to bake the guy cookies. And then when you go into flashback sections, I swear to God, every single character the grandfather meets in his investigation is like, oh, I have the important information for you in my safe, but I forgot the combination. And then you have to, like, guess. It's so bad. It's like, that's a perfect example of you have this great, intriguing story that could have been really interesting to explore, except the pacing is just killed by these completely stupid, arbitrary puzzles that have nothing to do with the story. Because it's just like, figure out my weird lock. So,
Oh, shit. Yeah, erring on the side of easy seems like the winner, because it's like, worst case scenario, they'd be like, this. It's the perfect game. I don't know, maybe the puzzles were a little too easy, 9 out of 10.
Yeah,
sold.
Exactly.
Like, I'll take it.
Exactly.
So, mate, why the bloody hell are you making a Western?
I don't know.
Great question, Paul.
No. So when I was making Lamplight City, it's set in an alternate 19th century, and I had done all, like, the world building and coming up with the city and everything. And I thought, this is cool. Like, this is very much the alternate 19th century urban, claustrophobic city story. Mm-hmm. But what would other parts of this alternate, United States that's called Vespuccia be like? And what sort of environment is contemporary to this time period? So, of course, I was like, oh, well, the Old West. That would be cool. It would be interesting to see what this sort of, like, alternate steampunky Old West is like without the giant mechanical spiders. I want to make very clear. Yeah. And so I was like, and you know what? Nobody really makes Westerns anymore. I mean, obviously, Hollywood hasn't really made a Western in a long time, like a classic quote-unquote Western. Yeah. And there's even fewer Western adventure games, and even fewer Western adventure games that are not comedies in the vein of Blazing Saddles, because, of course, when you think Western adventure games, you immediately think Freddy Farkas.
Yeah.
Which is a great game, but it's a comedy.
Yeah.
And, you have the more recent, like, Alamo and The Lost Dutchman's Mine, which is also a comedy. Mm-hmm. And then there's, like, the Fenimore Fillmore games, which I never played, but I think the first two are comedies, and the third one is, like, a more serious one. But I don't really know too much about those. So I thought, okay, well, this is an opportunity to, do something different. It's the complete polar opposite of Lamplight City, because it's a bright, wide open spaces kind of game. The Western setting is interesting. It's an untapped niche, and it's also a perfect setting for an adventure game because, as I said before, you're going on an adventure. So I sat down and I was like, well, what kind of story do I want to tell? Do I want to do like a revenge story? Do I want to do a treasure hunt? Do I want to do I don't know, like what's another? I forgot. I think I had 3. And I was like, why don't I do them all? There'll be like a big midpoint twist, and then you can choose whether you want to go for revenge or you want to do the treasure or whatever. And then I was like, that's stupid. I'm just going to do one. So I got rid of the revenge and I made it just a treasure hunt story.
Nice.
But I did want to do like the multiple path thing again. But slightly different, because in Lamplight City, obviously it was episodic in the sense that it was like case by case, and each case had a different outcome. But this time around, I figured what would be interesting is if the journey bit was randomized. So again, to cite Indiana Jones and the Fate of Atlantis, like, there's the first part, like the game's basically like divided into 3 acts. So like the first act is, you know, the introduction, and then the second act is when you pick which path you're going to take, and then the third act is Atlantis. And like the first act always plays out the same. There's a little bit of randomization, like where the lost dialogue of Plato is or whatever. And then the second act varies based on which path you take, and then the third act is always the same again. It like comes back to whatever. So I thought, okay, well, let me try kind of follow the same formula, and you know, the first act will be just like establishing and like meeting these characters. Because the other thing I was like, okay, well, I want to do this journey story, but I also want to do like the posse and the companion characters, and like have the core thing be like The Walking Dead, the Telltale Walking Dead, where you're like traveling with this group of people, and you can, you know, your relationship with them is affected by how you deal with them, or like how the situations play out and stuff like that. So then I was like, okay, so I want Act 1 to be that establishing thing. Then Act 2 will be the journey, where I can put in some changes and some randomization. And then Act 3 will be like Act 2 of Indiana Jones and the Fate of Atlantis, where instead of, you know, the third act always being the same, the way you get through that depends on how you treated your posse during Act 2. So like there's 3 different paths.
Oh man, that breathes life into the game for sure.
Yeah, exactly. So it's kind of like, you know, who's with you at the end of Act 2 based on your choices affects how you get through Act 3. So yeah, I didn't want to make it just be like, oh, you press this button and now you get this choice. Like you kind of have to get there through your choices throughout the game. So that's been real fun to design, but yeah, I'm excited about it, and I'm looking forward to it, and I'm hoping that, you know, people will look beyond the Western thing, because I mean, Westerns aren't necessarily like a maligned genre, but they're not exactly in vogue. Although,
well, I realized, Westerns, so.
Yeah, I mean, like I realized I was never a huge fan of like the classic spaghetti Westerns, but there's plenty of movies that you could consider Westerns that I've enjoyed. Like There Will Be Blood. That's not a traditional Western, but it's
right.
You know, kind of like that. And I mean, I liked the remake of True Grit, the Coen brothers, and I liked No Country for Old Men, which is obviously also a Western. Yeah. So I think the more like neo-Western is what I'm more attracted to. But even still, just like the themes of like, you know, the wide open spaces. And I mean, I love the geography of the American Southwest. Like I've been out there a few times, and I love the desert. I just love how it looks. I like the idea of like, you know, the West as being this unexplored frontier where people go and reinvent themselves, and like, you know, thematically and story wise, it's a cool setting. So.
Oh, and it's going to have great music too, because you have the same composer as you had with Lamplight. So I know the music's going to be phenomenal.
Yeah, I'm really excited about that. It's been a little bit slow going for various reasons, but we've had a little bit of. I mean, he's sent me a few things, and like, yeah, I'm really looking forward to also the fact that we're using live instruments to sweeten up some of the tracks, so that I think will help a lot.
You got lots going on. And you know, how many characters? There's like 50 characters in this thing. You've got voices for all of them. It's a little ambitious.
Well, yeah, I will tell you that I expect there to be maybe that many. There were 70 speaking parts in Lamplight City.
Wow.
I sort of just copy pasted that number for the Steam page. I'm very, very conscious of the fact that there was a lot of talking in Lamplight City, and I'm trying to pare down the dialogue for Rosewater for various reasons. But I mean, there definitely will probably be about 50 speaking roles, not 70, but but yeah. The thing too is like, you know, I'm doing the thing where like, you know, there's some characters you might not see because you might not get the particular encounter. So like the second act is divided up into little encounters and of varying lengths, and I've randomized it so you don't necessarily get the same sequence. So that'll be fun. Don't want to get too much into it just in case there's any spoilers.
Yeah, no worries.
Yeah.
So just before we wrap up, I have one last self-indulgent question. Because as I've alluded a couple times in this episode, Paul and I are actually working on, well, mostly Paul and I kind of chip in demands at him once in a while towards our own point-and-click adventure game that we're coming up. And as
which looks great, by the way.
Oh, thank you. That's Paul.
Thanks, Nate.
So yeah,
it's nice looking.
So
thank you.
Given that, like we've said before, you're kind of one of the big pioneers, or one of the, you've been around since the beginning of this whole revival of the modern classic style point and click adventure games.
That's right, Sonny. I've been there since.
So don't sit on his knee.
There's gold.
So what advice would you give to a couple of first timers who are just cracking into this now?
Ooh, some plucky young go-getters.
Oh, you whippersnappers! Look here. Okay, well, that's tricky. Okay, so the big advice which I learned was, as far as finishing a project, is start small. Don't get overambitious. Obviously you want to make, you want to make, you get that excitement of like, oh yeah, I want to make a game. And you want to make it like super ambitious, and you want to make like multiple paths and whatever. I would not have been able to make a game like Rosewater, my first game out the gate.
Right.
Because I didn't have the experience, and I wouldn't have been able to pull it off. And with each game I've made, I've learned something new, and I've grown as a designer and writer and whatever else I do. So I feel like, over scoping is and over ambition are like the two biggest death knells for projects. So I think keeping it within a manageable scope is of the utmost importance. The other thing is, it's a lot, because there are so many games now, it's so much harder to get noticed nowadays. I have noticed that, like, a lot of the times, like, indie developers, like, the big thing was always, get press, like email news outlets, get them talking about your game. And yeah, that still helps, but it's not as important now. And I think a big part of that is because of social media, and because it is a pain to do, because, like, community management is a full-time job in and of itself.
Yeah.
But I think building that audience and getting that engagement, and doing stuff like developer streams on Twitch, or just like, starting a Twitter account and just like posting screenshots and stuff, and just incessantly tweeting. I always feel guilty about doing it, but you got to do it, because tweets are ephemeral, right?
Yeah.
So like, those are my two pieces of advice. Don't go crazy with the size of your game, and don't be afraid to hustle and, like, engage with the community. And, like, Discord's great too. Because at the end of the day, like, you might be doing it as a hobby, or you want to make it, if you want to take a crack at doing it as a full-time thing, you're doing it for the love, obviously. But if you want to make a living, you got to sell games. So, yeah. And maybe port to mobile. I don't know. That seems like good advice.
Something to think about.
Yeah.
Somebody once told me.
A very wise old prospector said. That actually, quick side note about that. That's the other thing too. Like, the market's constantly changing, so you never know what's going to be worth it or not. So, like, with Lamplight City, we ported it to iOS, and I wasn't super excited, not excited. I wasn't, like, super enthusiastic necessarily, because I've realized that, like, the mobile market is basically full of, like, free-to-play games with in-app purchases, and it's the dynamic has changed to the point where, like, asking people to pay even, like, $4.99 for just a single play game, whatever. It's asking a lot nowadays. So I didn't have any illusions about, like, the game finding a second life on mobile, or, like, doing really well or whatever. So my publisher was like, "Oh, we'll port it to mobile." And I was like, "Okay, sure, whatever." Like, I don't expect to, have any success with this, to the point where I was like, I'm happy to like forfeit any royalties until we recoup the cost of the porting costs, figuring that I was never going to see any money, or if I did, it was going to take like months, if not years.
Mm-hmm.
And we broke even in like 4 months, which was amazing. And so now I'm getting royalties from Lamplight City on iOS, which for all intents and purposes, the conventional wisdom was that was never going to happen. So that was a surprise. So,
Nice.
But again, I can't say, oh yeah, that it's totally worth it, because who knows? The next game might not. It might fizzle out, So
Yeah.
it's always luck of the draw. But I think that, if you make informed decisions about, don't put all your eggs in one basket and be like, yeah, I'm going to spend all my money on porting to all these systems, and then you spend all your money and you can't get it back because it doesn't sell on those systems.
Right.
Yeah. Play it safe. I don't know. I'm just rambling now.
Well, I can say what's kind of cool, is sort of related, is that Scum VM is starting to introduce support for AGS. So at least through backdoor or just slightly more nerdy routes, we can start putting AGS games on mobile that way.
Yeah, Scum VM supporting AGS is exciting. I really don't know how it works for ports. But it'd be cool to be able to play the chef again on Scum VM.
I'm down for that. I can't wait.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
All right. Well, just before we go, it's your time now if you want to give any shout outs or plugs or anything like that, or promote your own stuff.
Well, I will tell you a very embarrassing and dirty secret, which is that I don't really play adventure games anymore. But I very much believe in the community and the social media community that we've built up, and I would like to plug some other people's games before plugging my own. I want to give a shout out to friend of the pod, Julia Minamata, who's working on the Crimson Diamond.
Yes.
Which is amazing and looks great, and she also does a dev stream. I would like to give a shout out to Nathan Hamley, also formerly Sick Chicken Studios, now Headwear Games, who made a game called Guard Duty, who's now working on Chasing Static, which looks amazing. I would like to shout out the folks at Cloak and Dagger Games, Sean Aitchison and John Inch, who are making Incantimentum, who always look... You all know who I'm talking about. It's fine. I want to shout out the amazing looking The Phantom Fellows, which is a very nice looking game as well, and is very funny from what I saw of Space Quest Historians' fair and balanced retrospective of that. See, the problem with shouting out other people is that you always forget someone, and then you feel like an ass because you didn't mention them. Jacob Janerka.
Nice.
Yeah, Jacob Janerka, who made Paradigm, who's working on the Dungeon Experience, also looks great. Gosh, who else? Crowns and Pawns. I forget what their studio name is, but they're working on a game called Crowns and Pawns, which is also like an exciting adventure globe-trotting thing, which looks cool. And many, many more. So yeah, there's plenty of adventure games. It always makes me sad when people are like, why don't people make point and clicks anymore? It's like more people are making point and clicks now than they did in the quote-unquote golden age. So
yeah, try going back like 20 years or 15 years, geez.
Yeah, when all you had was Runaway. Ugh. Sorry.
I think I have that in small box.
Yeah, I used to too, but then I realized it was a terrible game and I got rid of it on eBay.
What were the numbers you found again in terms of like within the last few years?
Oh gosh, yeah. I don't remember specifically, but it was like it was in the like several thousand. Well, maybe not thousands, but it was significantly higher number of releases within the past 10 years than between like 1991 and 1999.
Right.
Oh yeah.
So yeah. So as far as self-promotion, I have a Twitter. I am at Grundislav Games. That's Grundislav Games, or Never mind. I was going to sing the jingle, but never mind. I was going to give you guys a little fan service. All right, fine. It's Grundislav Grundislav Games.
I'm so happy.
I'm glad.
Patreon exclusive.
Yeah. I have a Twitch channel, which twitch.tv/Grundislav. I do a weekly developer stream, which I call Wild West Wednesdays, every Wednesday at 1 p.m. Eastern. And I do some other sporadic streams other times if I feel like it, but that one is the for sure one.
And which day is that on?
Wednesdays. Wild West Wednesdays.
Right.
I see what you did there.
I'm sorry.
Tuesdays, actually. No, Tuesday is Julia's day.
Oh, do we have to claim days now? Paul.
Yes.
That.
Phantom Fellows Fridays. You got it in the bag. It writes itself.
Awesome.
That's why you have to make your game alliterative. You have to make sure. Yeah, see that I couldn't. I was sad that I couldn't call it Rosewater Wednesday. I mean, I could, but it just doesn't have the ring to it. What else? Let's see. Twitch, Twitter. Oh, right. Yeah. So Rosewater, it's on Steam. You can wishlist it. Please wishlist it.
Yes.
I'm so close to 10,000 wishlists, and that means that the game will become popular upcoming when the release date comes up, which means that Steam will actually shove it in people's faces, which is nice because, exposure is always good. You can check out Lamplight City, which is also on Steam. You can purchase that on Steam or mobile. You can check out A Golden Wake, which is also on Steam and GOG, but not on mobile. You can check out Shardlight, which is also on Steam and GOG. Not on mobile yet. I mean, A Golden Wake. I was getting ahead of myself there. A Golden Wake, which is on Steam and GOG, but not on mobile yet. No promises, but maybe. I have to give Paul some false hope. And then there's also Shardlight, which is on Steam and GOG. And you can check out all of my old Ben Jordan games and stuff on Grundislavgames.com. If you go there and you get you won a free thing alert, just reload the page because I've had problems with malware for a long time and it's annoying. But it won't hurt your computer. It's just annoying. What else? I think that's it. I'm tired of listening to myself talk. I hope you aren't.
No, we've deliberately let this run longer than we do most episodes.
Oh no!
Yes.
No, it's fine. It's our pleasure.
It is. I've been so excited.
You can ask the others. I'm usually I'm pretty strict on our time.
Okay, guys, it's been 47 minutes. 47 minutes, guys.
Maybe you can do this as a two-parter and tease the audience. Or not.
We'll see.
Yeah.
We might.
All right.
Second part on Patreon.
Yeah.
Anyways. Okay.
All right, mates. Thank you very much for listening. And I'm sorry if I came across stern for some reason. All right, mates. I've had it with your shit.
Sit your ass down while I thank you.
The floggings will continue, mates. Sorry, I'm in my pirate cove. I had to.
Oh, this is great.
Buddy, you know the drill. Do your homework. Go to Facebook.com because we're a page in a group, Classic Gamers Guild on Facebook. Go to Instagram at CGG Podcast. And also go to Twitter at the CG Guild. Do us a bloody tweet. If you want to send us an email, send us an email at mail@classicgamersguild.com. And thank you to all of our Patreons. Sincerely, we really appreciate your help and everything you do to support the show. Special extra thanks to Jay Holmes and Mark Fillion. Please check out Mark's game, Chinatown Detective Agency, on Steam and wishlist it. And when you're there, wishlist Rosewater. And also big thank you to a new Patreon, Lester. Just one name, a little mysterious. I like that, mate. Alluring. Thank you for your support, Lester. And, buddy, that's it. So I don't know who needs to hear this, but don't do a murder.